Hi everyone, welcome to Deep Geek Live. This is the next in a series of videos I'm doing looking at the different areas, the different parts of the world of Ice and Fire. We've done the North, we've done the Riverlands, and today we're going to be focusing in on the Vale of Arryn. Before we get into that, just a little bit what I try to do at the beginning of these live streams is just do a little bit of a news roundup, just a few things that we've got going on in the world. First thing was this time last week, we had some breaking news about extra TV shows that were possibly in the works in the world of Ice and Fire. We didn't get huge amounts of information on that. We still haven't had confirmation from either HBO or George R.R. Martin, although informed sources tell us that they are definitely looking at Dunk and Egg, and they are definitely thinking about Robert's Rebellion. We've had a little bit of extra information on that now, that probably not Dunk and Egg, but they are considering doing a more not just live action, but also some animated stuff in this world. So this is starting to look as if this is very much like an expanded universe idea. This is something that Disney have clearly been running with for a while. We've all seen what they've been doing with Star Wars, where they've not just been focusing on the films, but they've been having, first of all, The Mandalorian, and now they've announced, what is it, 10 extra series, which is sort of branching off of this. They've also got the Marvel Cinematic Universe, of course, which is now branching out into TV shows like WandaVision. This is the model that a lot of these different networks are heading down. HBO have looked around, figured out what it is that their sort of prize asset is, and their prize asset is Game of Thrones. And so what they're doing is they are just saying, we're not just going to run with this one spin-off that we know is going to happen. House of the Dragon still lined up for 2022, so next year, but also we're going to see what else can we do. Can we have 2, 3, 4 more different types of programs running based in this same universe? So they're not just thinking about doing a TV show, 10 episodes in a season or whatever. They're thinking, can we, because this is I think it's Warner Brothers who own them, can we make films? Can we make animations? Can we make shorter one-off dramas? What are the different things that we can be playing with here? So expect to see over the course of the next year or so in the world of Game of Thrones a few of these ideas that they seem to be just throwing out a few ideas at the moment start to get a little bit more color in them, start to look as if they're actually things that they might run with. We're not going to see any of this, yes, House of the Dragon next year, but we're not going to see any of these ideas, I wouldn't have thought, for another 3 years or more. But this is where we are going with it. You'll also see in the news Harry Potter. There's going to be a Wizarding World of Harry Potter TV show. Very few details about that again, but that is trying to build on the franchise. How do we expand it out beyond just having the films? What else can we have in that? And Netflix have got Narnia. They've talked about having a universe there, so expect films, TV shows, a huge amount. Again, no real detail. They bought the rights about 2 years ago now, I think, and then it all went very quiet. So we're waiting to hear what's going on there. The Witcher, similarly, we've had, obviously there's the main show, but there's 2 or 3 other spin-offs that they're looking at that they're going to be doing on The Witcher. So this is the way the world seems to be heading at the moment. When we get a TV show that is a big success, then we must expect from that the networks are going to be trying to build up a whole series of other things around it. So it's quite exciting, but we still don't have huge amounts of detail at the moment about what might be happening. So watch this space. Expect over the course of the next year or so details to slowly trickle out. People start to be attached to projects, and once people are attached to projects, that's when we start getting a little bit more detail coming out. Questions, well, a few thank yous actually first, before we get into the questions. Ryan Larkin, thank you so much for the super sticker before we went live. Ariel Winchester, thank you also for the super sticker. Catherine Fursith saying, hi Robert, just to thank you for the great videos that keep us sane during these times. You provide insight and a fun and loving community. The community here is fantastic, absolutely, I have to say. You give us all light in dark places when all other light has gone out. Thank you. That's a lovely thing to say. Thank you very much. And Mara Lee saying, just my show of love, support and appreciation for all the fabulous content, stories and merch. Love and hugs to Dan. That's Dan the dog. That's my dog. People keep on asking me for pictures. I have now given, by popular demand, a picture of Dan the dog on Instagram. So if you would like to see the creature, then please do go and have a look on Instagram. Just search for Deep Geek and you will find me. The other bit of news just before moving on, we've had, this is more a sort of a leak, a filming leak rather than anything else. I don't tend to go into sort of leaks on details, but just in terms of timing for Lord of the Rings. And what we hear is that they are, as we suspected, they are going to be filming seasons 1 and 2 back to back. They've greenlit seasons 1 and 2 straight away. So this probably means, given the fact that the key people are going to be involved all the way through, that probably means that season 1 will happen slightly later than we expect. I'm still expecting it within about a year. They're well into filming season 1 now, but season 2 is probably going to be slightly earlier than we had previously expected. So there won't be a long gap between seasons 1 and 2. Season 2 will come along within the year. So my feel is that Amazon, they always seem to have this game plan. The Wheel of Time is the other big fantasy TV show which is in the works with Amazon. That always seemed to be there, dipping the toe into the waters of high fantasy as a TV show before they go to the Lord of the Rings, which clearly they've invested huge amounts of money in, with the Wheel of Time, which could well be excellent. That they filmed, I think, 6 of the 8 episodes, and they're going to start up filming again in, I think, April. So I think now we're probably in a world of that appearing first, then we're going to get Lord of the Rings appearing after that on Amazon. But Amazon are very much investing heavily into this world of trying to find the next Game of Thrones. Okay, so that's enough with the sort of the news of what's going on in the geeky world. Question from Duncan Idaho, super chat, thank you so much, saying, hi Robert, do you have any thoughts on the theory that Timett, son of Timett, is the true heir to the Vale? Alt-Shift-X did a video on it a while back. The short answer is no, I do not. This is not the best way to start a live stream, but I think I did watch that video a long time ago, and I quite liked it. I always take my hat off to Alt-Shift-X. He puts a huge amount of research into his videos. But I think that the short answer on this is that we do not have the information. There are hints there that you could perhaps interpret one way or another. It's along the lines of, is Lyanna Mormont the secret love child of Tormund Giantsbane? There are hints, but we probably won't know. And frankly, George R. R. Martin loves being in this kind of grey ground where we might know a few things here and there, but we don't know. We don't know for sure. So this is where he has left it, is that it would be an interesting little twist. Same as is Tyrion a Targaryen and all the rest of it. It would be an interesting twist, but we're never going to find out for sure. So that, I think, is where George R. R. Martin has left it. I don't think we've got enough evidence to say this is absolutely true, but at the same time, I don't think we've got the evidence to say it absolutely isn't true. So so that's where we're at. It's one of those things where George R. R. Martin has left it deliberately vague, I'm afraid. Richard Smith saying, hope your loved ones are getting jabbed. Thank you. This was a super chat before we went on air. Thank you. Yeah, so in the UK, the vaccine rollout is happening, and we're working our way through very rigidly from highest risk all the way down. So thank you. Yes, and my loved ones will be getting them in the right order, which is good. Is Jon Arryn an underrated Machiavellian? He instigates the war, leaves the heavy lifting to Robb and Ned, then ends up as hand to a king disinterested in ruling. I think I love this theory. I love the thinking behind it, but I think the answer is no. He did not instigate this war, is the main point I would say here. For Jon Arryn, he was left with an impossible choice. What the starting point for the war technically was when the Mad King Aerys II, he demanded that Robert and Ned be sent to King's Landing, where they would be killed. And Jon Arryn was then left in a situation, well, what does he do next? Actually, you could argue very strongly that Aerys II had already effectively declared war, because he had already murdered, killed not just Brandon Stark and Rickard Stark, so the Stark Lord, the Stark heir, but also as part of Brandon's retinue, Lord Arryn's heir as well had been murdered, killed by Aerys II. So actually the first aggressive act was not Jon Arryn, this was Aerys II. What is Jon Arryn to do? Well, he's certainly not going to give up his 2 foster children to this, and frankly they would not have gone even if he had tried to hand them over. Would you have gone? I certainly wouldn't have. So I don't think he instigated this. I think he was just left in a position that he could not get out of. He did indeed, you could argue, leave the heavy lifting for Robert and Ned. I think that's not probably the language I would use. I've got a question about what he did during the war in a moment, but Robert Baratheon just charged through the continent. It was not a matter of leaving the heavy lifting to Robert Baratheon. Robert Baratheon just got up ahead of steam and just went through battle after battle after battle. When we get to Ned obviously worked his way up to the north and then came all the way back down, and he took part in fewer battles effectively than Jon Arryn did. So it wasn't really a matter of Jon Arryn leaving the heavy lifting to the other 2. This was a matter of Robert Baratheon was just had such a head of steam that you couldn't. Everyone else was just flailing around in his wake. So where he ends up is as hand to the king, to a very disinterested king. And yes, he had power, but there's nothing to suggest that he was the kind of person who was trying to grab power. If this were a Littlefinger type character, yes, perhaps we could accuse him of trying to climb the greasy pole to get to a position of greater power and authority, but that wasn't seemingly what his character was about. He wasn't trying to grab power. There's no hints that once as Hand of the King, he tried to get any more power than he already had. Littlefinger came in and Varys was there, and he seemed to allow them to have their own power bases. So I think the short answer is no. He did not use the war to get extra power. He just ended up in a better position afterwards. Nenyan, thank you so much, saying finally able to catch a stream live again. Just a simple thank you for all your hard work. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, and that's fantastic when people can watch these live streams live as well. Get involved in the chat. It's a very different experience. Question from Vera Glauben. Hi there, saying, hi Robert, I do not recall from the text. Maybe you could talk on the relationship between Tywin and Jon Arryn. Yeah, so they did have a positive relationship back in the day. Jon Arryn was of that same generation with Tywin and also Eyrie. So for a while, the three of them were quite close. Actually, we often think about Eyrie and Tywin, but Jon Arryn was also a part of that gang. It's just that Tywin stayed in the center of power, whereas Jon Arryn was less power hungry, shall we say. So that was where they were at. In terms of afterwards, once Robert's rebellion had happened and Robert was king and all the rest of it, what was their relationship like? Well, I think that Tywin had to accept the fact that Jon Arryn was Hand of the King. He never seemed to really dispute this. Tywin deliberately held back in Robert's rebellion and only came in at the very last minute, deciding which side he was going to take. And I think that he realized pragmatically that that meant that he couldn't suddenly swan in and become Hand of the King himself. So I think he accepted the fact that that Jon Arryn was going to be Hand of the King. What he got out of it was he got his daughter married to the new king. So that's where it wasn't. And then Tywin could just go away and plot and try and build up his power base on his own back at Casterly Rock for the next decade and a half or so. So how was their relationship? I think it was positive and constructive without being, certainly later on, close between the two of them. So that's probably as far as we can go on that. Prince of Quarkness saying, thanks, Robert, for the excellent work. George R. R. Martin loves nuanced characters, but what were the flaws of Jon Arryn, whom everyone seems to think was great? Yes, so I think we never get to meet him in person. This is one of the fascinating things about Jon Arryn, is that once the action starts, he's dead, basically, in a Game of Thrones. So we never actually get to meet him. We only ever get to see him through the eyes of others. Now, yes, he did seem to have a lot of positive attributes. Ned obviously seemed to hero worship him to a degree. Robert obviously treated him like a bit of a father figure as well. In terms of what wasn't he good at, I think there are a couple of things which do stand out. The first is the fact that although, yes, he may well have been a competent administrator, it seems very obvious that Robert Baratheon did start running the kingdom into the ground, and Jon couldn't really stop him. He got to the crown into a huge amount of debt. Littlefinger was always ready with some clever, crazy scheme for shifting money around to make sure that everything could happen that needed to happen. But Jon Arryn, I think, was clever enough to realize what was going on, but not strong enough to do anything about it. So I think that's probably the first thing. The second, he obviously didn't know what was happening underneath his nose with his wife and Littlefinger. That is clearly a little bit of something that was a blind spot for him, shall we say. And then thirdly, we have to accept the fact that he was the person who started doing, or was very strongly involved in, this hunt for the truth in terms of, are the three children, alleged children of Robert Baratheon, really his children? And he was the person. Ned was then sort of following his clues after this, and he doesn't seem to have done that in a particularly subtle way. So although, yes, he seems clever, he didn't, and he figured out stuff that was going on, he didn't seem to be able to do that in a way that King's Landing required, to be discovering things without immediately putting himself in the firing line. So those are the sort of the flaws we have, is that he seems to have been generally a good man, but probably and competent without ever being strong enough or clever enough or subtle enough to quite work through all of the politics of King's Landing. Ajninomi saying, hi, Robert, love your videos and analysis. What are your thoughts on the theory that Howland Reed is Sir Shadrich the Mad Mouse? Well, I've not seen the theory, so I don't know the evidence that is presented for that. My take is that Howland Reed is, because he's such an important character, I think he genuinely is in the neck. I think that's where he is. I think he is exactly where we think he is. I don't think there's any particular plot reason for him to be anywhere else. The whole purpose is that him as a character is to appear in order to later on to be telling some of the truths about what happened back at Robert's Rebellion. And he is the link in with the Weirwood network and Bloodraven and all the rest of it. So I don't think that there's a plot or character need for him to be any other character. I think that there's a plot and character need for him to be exactly where he is. So that's my general take on Howland Reed. I love all the theorizing of different people could secretly be other people, but we always have to come back to is there a plot or character need for this? Is there a plot or character need for Howland Reed to be leaving the neck at this point? No. What he's interested in is getting his children up to support, getting Bran up to Bloodraven, which he has already done. So that is the point he's got there. And he clearly has access from where he is into the Weirwood network. So I think he is exactly where we think he is. Question from... also Zasambadji saying Jon Arryn seems to have many of the same flaws as Ned Stark, though more politically savvy. Yes, I think that's probably a fair compliment. I think that a comment. I think there. Question from Mara Lee. Hi there, Mara. Thank you for the super sticker. I've got some questions from you coming up later. Duncan Idaho saying, if you could cast anyone to play Jon Arryn in a hypothetical Robert's Rebellion prequel series, who would you choose? I'm never good on these casting things. So we're back at Robert's Rebellion. He would be in his 40s or so, I guess. So I don't know. I'm going to throw that one to the chat, actually. What's the name of the guy who's in Lemony Snicket? I think I'll go with him. I think he would be excellent at this, actually. But I'll throw this one to the chat. I will try and pick out a few answers to that one. Who would you cast as Jon Arryn in Robert's Rebellion prequel series? Question from Ghoul City. How do we know Robin is Jon's son? We know Littlefinger was hitting on Lysa's cheeks. Maybe an explanation for Robin's illness. I've got some questions on this coming up, so I'll cover this one in a little bit more detail later. But at a headline level is no, we do not know. We don't have absolute evidence either way. There are some bits of information that hint at it. So, for example, the colouring, he's got dark hair, so that seems to fit in with Littlefinger rather than Lysa obviously had the red hair. Jon Arryn, I think, had fair hair of some kind. Where does that come from? There's also a few sort of throwaway comments that Lysa makes, but a lot of those could be read either way. So we don't have conclusive evidence either way on that one, I'm afraid. Have I caught up on everything in the chat? I think I'm caught up on the chat. So let's do Sydney Rose from Patreon. This is a sort of a slightly broader question. I know there are so many plots and knots in the book series, and the showrunners felt the need to consolidate plots and landscapes to make the show more singular to viewers. But do you think in the prequel series we'll be exploring more of the world, perhaps accompanying some of the Targaryens in their travels to visit the Stormlands, the North, and the Vale. Yes. So we don't know how long they might stretch the House of the Dragon out for. I heard 5 seasons, but you never know. The story that we have got about the Dance of the Dragons, because basically this is telling the story of the Dance of the Dragons, is largely based around the southern bits of Westeros. So you get, in the early parts of the war, you do get a few of these little missions going up to Winterfell and the Eyrie and places like that, trying to gather support from the various lords. But we don't have huge amounts of action going on there. Now, that said, what we've got on the Dance of the Dragons is a couple of 100 pages or so, I guess, in Fire and Blood. I've not counted exactly, but compare that to what we had for A Song of Ice and Fire so far, which is thousands of pages. We've got comparatively little. And what that means is that although, yes, we've got a lot of information, there's a lot more wiggle room, and it's up to you to decide whether this is a good thing or not, but there is a lot more wiggle room for the showrunners to add stuff in, to go their own way. What we had with A Song of Ice and Fire morphing into the Game of Thrones, the TV show, was a matter of them cutting stuff out, cutting stuff down, taking bits of plot out, taking characters out, and that was what led to having to have plot changes because they'd taken characters out and all the rest of it, and then squashing it. So Game of Thrones was about taking a huge story and squashing it down. This is about taking a big story, but possibly adding elements to it. So, as I say, it's up to you to decide whether you think that might be a good thing, but it does open the possibility that although, yes, there was some action going on in the Vale, there was some action going on up in Winterfell and the like, that they could decide to expand out on any of those little things if they wanted to. And they have obviously got the sets. They're not based in the same place, so they're not going to be producing it up in Northern Ireland. They're going to be producing it just outside London, I believe, but they will obviously have been retaining a huge amount of the original set designs and all the rest of it. So if they wish to recreate the insides of any of these places, they can do that again very easily. Let's go to a few questions now from my patrons about the Vale. Anime Lover Nicole saying, "Hey Robert, what do you think the Vale of Arryn was called before the Andal invasion?" Okay, so a little bit of history here just to set the context for the Vale as a whole. The Vale of Arryn as a whole concept of what it is at the moment is actually relatively recent. The idea that there is one overarching lord in charge of all of this. The Vale has got lots of different parts to it. Now, we probably know we've got the Mountains of the Moon. Huge swathe of this is mountainous. The mountain clans rule there. They have never been accepting the rulership of the lords from the Eyrie, so they are in charge of themselves. That is probably the largest part, certainly in southern Westeros, a part of Westeros which is just completely not accepting the rule from the Iron Throne in any way, shape, or form. So you get the mountainous area. You get the Vale itself. It's long, but it's thin, and it's incredibly lush. This valley, which produces huge amounts of produce. It's just as lush and rich as the Reach, but it's smaller. So there's the Vale, and at the side of the Vale, you get the Giant's Lance and the Eyrie up the top there. Then you get a few other little areas which are not mountainous and not the Vale. There's this promontory to the south where you get Gulltown, the only major port and also Runestone, which is quite an old place. This is where House Royce is based. So that is one relatively rich area. Then you get an area up to the north, which is slightly less mountainous, where you get places like the Fingers. That's there. It's very hard to get to, though. This is where Littlefinger came from, House Baelish and all the rest of it. And then up in the Gullet, which is that bit of sea between the Vale and the north, then you get the Three Sisters, which technically are ruled by the Vale, but it's more sort of like a nodding acceptance of rulership rather than actually paying sort of huge amounts of respect to them on an ongoing basis. They accept the fact that they have to have a liege lord, but they don't really do much about that. So there's lots of different areas. This was not until really relatively recently, the whole idea of the Vale as a whole being ruled by one place is not. That wasn't the case. What you had was a huge amount of smaller kingdoms. So, for example, you got, and I think, Marley, you had a question, who were the kings of the mountains and Vale that ruled the Vale of Arryn before Aegon's conquest? There were lots of these smaller kings. So, for example, you get House Royce. They ruled their own area as well. Lots of these smaller kingdoms. And the Vale of Arryn is that Vale. It's rather, and it was just the region as a whole that is known as the Vale, and became known as the Vale of Arryn because the House Arryn were in charge of it. So that's what we've got, and it's probably, out of all of the different regions of Westeros, probably the most diverse in geography in a compact area. You get lots of diversity in other parts of the Seven Kingdoms, but here you get mountains as well as the lush valleys, as well as the ports, as well as the coastal areas. You get all of it in one chunk. So that's the kind of the geography, and that has created an area that has its own identity and is also culturally quite isolated, because during the winter, and remember, winters can last for years. During the winter, it is cut off. The high pass, the high road that goes through the Mountains of the Moon, at the best of times, it's quite a dangerous road to be traveling along. But during winter, you cannot pass it at all. So the only way in is through the ports. The main port being Gulltown, which actually lends it, if you had to compare it to one other part of the Seven Kingdoms, lends it the same kind of feel as the North, which has got this one road in that is very hard to go up and down and through, or you have to go in via port. So White Harbour there, or Gulltown in the Vale. So it is quite, although yes, it's culturally very similar to a lot of the sort of Andal-dominated south of Westeros, it is also very cut off for a huge amount of the time. Question from Bear Island Josh, saying, is it possible that Sheepstealer is still alive in a cave in the mountains of the Vale? It's entirely possible. So we have, for those who don't know, Sheepstealer is one of the dragons that was on Dragonstone. This comes from the time of the Dance of the Dragons, and the Blacks at the time were on Dragonstone, and they had a bizarre problem that they had too many dragons, not enough dragon riders. And so they came up with this solution that they would get what they called the dragon seeds, those people who perhaps have got some hereditary genes from the Valyrians, bastard children basically around the area. And they said, if you want to have a try to bond with a dragon, you can. Sheepstealer had Nettles bond with it. Nettles did this very cleverly by just leaving out a sheep every day for a long period of time, and then sort of getting closer and closer and closer, and forming a bond in what is probably a good old-fashioned way of doing it, rather than just relying on sort of going up there and trying to climb on its back. It took a long time over it. But anyway, Nettles and Sheepstealer then were together. During the Dance of the Dragons, then we get this time when a couple of these dragon seeds then did betray the Blacks, and as a result, Queen Rhaenyra basically said, "Well, they're all the same, and let's just kill them," basically. And so Nettles and Sheepstealer head off. They go to the Mountains of the Moon in the Vale. They appear again in Fire and Blood a bit later, just at the end of the Dance of the Dragons. An army, for complicated political reasons, heads into the Vale, and they stumble across Sheepstealer and Nettles. There, a lot of the people die, and Nettles gets on Sheepstealer and flies further into the Mountains of the Moon. Then we get reports of a fire witch and her dragon, which is almost certainly them. And there are possibilities that this is connected in with the Burned Men, one of the clans from the Mountains of the Moon, where they have to show their that they are grown up, that they are true men by burning, possibly originally by staring down the flames of the dragon, but more recently by holding their hand into flame or some such to burn themselves out. Now, this is a clue that Sheepstealer did stay alive for a little while longer. We don't know. We don't have any records of what happened, so it's possible that Sheepstealer is still alive. Dragons can stay alive for a very long time. Sheepstealer was a grown dragon at the time, so if Sheepstealer is still alive, that's 150 years later. It would be very old, so it's not likely. And added to which, the hints are there from the language that we have of the last dragon appearing during the reign of Aegon III. Seems to imply that the other dragons that were around were already dead, Sheepstealer being one of them. Otherwise, surely we would have heard of some plan to go and get Sheepstealer. So the hint is that Sheepstealer must have died, and the fact that this cult of the Burned Men seems to have moved from facing down dragon fire to just a fire ritual seems to imply that the dragon is no longer there. So we do not know. We do not have full evidence on this, but all of the hints are that Sheepstealer probably is now dead. Carl Logo saying, Robert, what are you most worried that we will not see happen by the conclusion of the main series? Interesting question. So I don't think I'm concerned about much that won't happen. I think George R. R. Martin, I don't think his fault in writing is cutting corners. So I think that he is going to keep writing and try and make sure that absolutely everything ties together. I think his greater fault is creating too many loose ends that do need tying off. So I'm not that concerned about there being anything that is not finished off. I mean, there are a lot of questions that I have, but that I hope we get answers to. But I think that and this is perhaps not the answer you would want, but it's my honest answer, is my preference is that if George R. R. Martin either gives us those answers or allows there to be space for us to come to our own conclusions. And an example of this is the Tyrion Targaryen thing, is that I'm pretty sure we're never going to get a full answer on, is Tyrion a secret Targaryen? There will be hints that maybe, but he will leave it for us to decide for ourselves. This seems to be very much his writing style, that he just wants us to be able to read stuff into this, and if it helps us in our own interpretation of it to be going in with that, then he will certainly allow it. But I don't think, so I think what I'm saying is that I give him the, not for me really to give to him, but I allow him as a writer the ability to leave things unsaid if he, for his own personal creative vision, allows that. Or wants that, I should probably say, rather than allows that. Question from Darby, just quickly picking on it. Have you ever watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer? Yes, I have. Again, a little while ago, but it was. And I have no idea how well it's dated because it has been a while, but I really enjoyed it at the time. Kevin Warner, thank you so much for the super chat, saying, what do you think will happen to Sweetrobin going forward? Will he be involved in the Bran Children of the Forest story? I mean, my take is that Sweetrobin is largely going to be this character who is there as a mechanism for Littlefinger to try to get to advance, and I think that is where we're going to go. Now, I certainly expect, and we will definitely come on to this, the Sweetrobin connection to Bran is a strong one. If you've never really sat down and thought through it, there was, I mean, on the TV show, there was obviously a visual sort of similarity between the two actors, but also there is these two figures who are now, depending on who you listen to, the rightful rulers of their parts of the Seven Kingdoms, and added to which Sweetrobin sits on a Weirwood throne, and added to which he seems to be obsessed with this idea of flying, make them fly, which obviously is a very clear theme for Bran about flying. So there are people have suggested that perhaps Robin Arryn was another one of these people that Bloodraven tried to contact to test out whether or not they were potentially a Greenseer. But is he going to be connected in with the Bran thing? I personally suspect not. I think that the Vale will have a role in the Winds of Winter, but its primary role is getting Sansa back up to Winterfell and getting Littlefinger up and out and away from his own personal comfort zone. I think that is the main thing we're going to be seeing from the Vale. I think Robert Arryn is not going to be connected in. The lack of which, actually I'll connect this in with Melissa Gill asked, are there any living Weirwoods in the Vale? This, I think, is really important because of the fact that we are not told about living Weirwoods in the Vale. The implication is possibly not at all. There definitely isn't one at the Eyrie, which is where Sweetrobin has been spending almost all of his time because he's a summer child. He has grown up there, and there is not. They tried planting one, but it wouldn't take root. So he has not grown up. Yes, he sits on a Weirwood throne, but that Weirwood is not connected in with the Weirwood network as a whole. And if he comes down into as he has done, into the Vale proper, are there any Weirwood trees there? Not that we've heard of yet. There might be, but we haven't heard of any Weirwood trees. So the Vale as an area, like Dawn, seems to be a part of Westeros that is largely without Weirwood trees. There might be in some of the castles and perhaps in Gultan or somewhere like that, but we haven't been told about them, so I think we have to assume that at best there is a limited coverage of the Weirwoods in the Vale, which makes sense if you accept the fact that there is a mountain range which cuts off the Vale in the same way that there's a mountain range that cuts off, say, Dawn. So that seems to be the kind of thing which prevents the Weirwood trees from linking up. Your last great night. Thank you so much for the super chat, saying, can you explain the roles or importance of being named one of the wardens of a region, north, south, east, or west, and why was Tywin demanding Jaime be named warden of the east after Jon died? Thanks. So this it's a good question, because this seems to be normally linked in with being the warden of the north was the Lord of Winterfell, and the warden of the east, Lord Arryn, and so on. But it wasn't necessarily always the case. Why would you want to have Jaime being the warden of the east? Because that seems to imply with it that this is a post that has control over the forces of the east. And why would Tywin want his son to have control over the forces of the east? Well, why wouldn't he? Robin Arryn was young, and so until it's the same way that when you had a king who was too young to rule by themselves, then there would be regents who would sort of rule in their stead. What you would have, or what the implication was, that Robin Arryn was too young to be in control of the armies of the east, and therefore you needed somebody else in control. And why on earth would not Tywin want to have some influence over there? He was very keen to have Robin Arryn as his own ward. He seemed to see this as a big political play. This was somewhere whereas he would find it quite hard to gain political influence over, say, the north or the Iron Islands, actually gaining political influence over the Vale of Arryn, there was a chance there. So he was trying his best to get the political influence as much as he possibly could, while Jon Arryn was not there, because once Jon Arryn had gone, who was in charge? Well, there was a power vacuum, obviously. Littlefinger obviously moved in to try and take control, but from the outside it definitely looked like there was a power vacuum. Question from who have we got here? Robin Blackwood, hi there, saying, do you see any link between the Crannogmen and the Sistermen? Outside of their proximity, they are both referenced as having webbed hands and feet. They are. So I think proximity, so Sistermen, these are people who come from the Three Sisters. Now, just thinking about your geography of Westeros for one moment, you have the neck, which is obviously where there's quite a narrow part of Westeros, and just to the east of that is the Bight. Now that in it has got these islands, the Sisters, and so they are very close geographically to the Crannogmen, the neck. So yes, there is a geographical proximity. The webbed hands and feet thing, this is something that apparently the Sistermen have. That does certainly seem to imply a sort of a link across to the Crannogmen. But as much as anything else, it definitely does imply some degree of interbreeding, or certainly the fact that they have not got much intermarriage with the outside world. So that is what George R. R. Martin is trying to show us, is that the people who are there on the Three Sisters are independent and they do not mix with people beyond their islands. Now, is there a link across with the Crannogmen? I don't think we're expected to see that in terms of, I don't think that we'll suddenly discover that the Sistermen are secretly these great worshippers of the old god that are doing some great plotting behind the scenes, which is what Howland seems to be doing. But it is noticeable that they do have a role in saving Ned Stark, and then also in saving Davos. Now, this does seem to imply an independence of thought, that it means that they are happy to do what they think is right. And again, echo across, we get Howland, who saved Ned's life, and we also get the Sistermen who saved Ned's life, because Ned, for those who forget, when he started Robert's Rebellion, he got in a ship, fisherman's ship. There was a storm, and he ended up basically being shipwrecked on the Three Sisters, and he was basically saved there. And from there, he then headed up to White Harbour. So I think we're supposed to see echoes, but we're not supposed to necessarily see that they are one people divided by a little bit of water. Question from Connor Walsh, saying, "Hi Robert, your videos give me something to look forward to in quite a bleak lockdown for me. Thank you so much. 7 blessings." Well, thank you so much. If I can bring some happiness and light into people's lives through this, then that will make me very happy indeed. Think that's me. Oh, I did have one more question in the chat. Saying, Prince of Quarkness, saying, "If Bloodraven cast his net as wide as Sweetrobin and Euron, isn't it odd that he succeeded with the half-brother to his other pet project, Jon Snow?" Yes, I'm not entirely sure I understand the exact point there, but in terms of him casting his net wide, for those who are unaware of this, the hints are that it wasn't just Bran who Bloodraven tried to contact through those dreams. He sees, when Bran looks down, he sees the bodies of lots of people who've been having the same dream as him and then did not fly. And Euron seems to use a huge amount of the same language that seems to imply that perhaps he may have had the same dream when he was younger, and then his own symbolism seems to come through when he chooses the crow's eye and things like that. This is very reminiscent of Bloodraven. So he does seem to have cast his net quite widely there. With Jon Snow, this was more precision. So it seems more like he was quite happy to cast his net wide in order to try and find a green seer, because he knew how rare they were. But Jon Snow, he was trying specifically to get somebody with the exact genetic inheritance that Jon Snow had. With the Targaryen and the Stark and all the rest of it. So I think there were different things that he was trying to do there. I think one of which was casting his net wide, one of which was quite precision. Morally asking about the Eyrie, saying, "Why is the Eyrie so impregnable?" This is something that says that is shown, I said a lot, so it's told a lot, but it is shown in book 1 when we get Catelyn, who goes up to the Eyrie. We get basically an entire chapter or half a chapter of her going to ascending to the Eyrie. And when you go through that, I did one of my traveler's guide on this, you realize quite how hard it would be for a normal army to attack. It's single file, not just single file, but when you start heading further up, you have to really trust people who know the route and can go through. You have to rely on donkeys and goats and animals that are aware of it. There is a guide who specifically can be there to tell you the route up. There are some way gates on the way that can pinch points that can hold people back. It is a very, very hard. Any kind of advantage you might have as an invading army, if you had catapults or ballista or whatever, you wouldn't be able to haul them up. Added to which, any weight of numbers that you had is almost completely destroyed by the fact that you're in single file and having to go uphill. So it is almost impossible to attack it. Added to which, the last bit is done basically by sort of being hauled up on a winch. So it's that the whole thing is very, very hard to do. That said, if you have one dragon, you can just land on the top of it. So it's impregnable for normal forces, but for dragons, it's not a problem at all. Sylvester Snow saying, "Hello, Robert. Will Timett, son of Timett or Shagger, appear again in the story?" So we've got so Timett, son of Timett, and Shagger were the characters who are the leaders of the mountain clans that Tyrion recruited, and he took with him not just in the wars, but then they arrived down in King's Landing, and they were they caused all kinds of fun going down there. They're not really used to city life, but they were exactly what Tyrion needed. Now, what happened was that they kind of got locked out when Tyrion was no longer the Hand of the King. They had been sent out to the Kingswood, and they just then weren't allowed back in. Tywin wasn't going to allow them back in. So they then seem to go their separate ways. So we get Shagger stays down in the Kingswood. Timett, son of Timett, heads back up to his homeland, to the Mountains of the Moon. Now, they then sort of disappear from the story. We hear just one mention, I think, of Timett, son of Timett, where since he's been there, come back, then the trying to get through the Mountains of the Moon is even harder, because he's now got his burned men to be even more aggressive in attacking people who are traveling along that high road. So are they going to make a reappearance? Now, again, this is all about character and it's all about plot. Is there a reason for them to appear? In the Kingswood, it's possible. I don't think that Shagger's going to have a huge role, but the Kingswood is between the Storm's End and King's Landing. Now, we hear about, in the pre-release chapters from the Winds of Winter, we hear about armies moving to and fro there. For the Tyrell army apparently is moving from King's Landing down towards Storm's End, and at some point, then the army of Aegon VI, is going to be moving from Storm's End up towards King's Landing. I imagine we will probably just hear a bit there. Maybe Shagger will try and do a raid on them or something. I don't know, but I don't think that's going to be a major plot point. A bigger plot point, I suspect, probably will be Timett, son of Timett, and the Burned Men, because this has been played up so much, this idea that the mountains are impassable and they have become even more dangerous with his return. At some point, we are going to get the Littlefinger and co wishing to escape from the Vale. Now, when I say escape from the Vale, that's not because I think they're going to come under particular attack, but that is going to be cut off very soon because of the winter. And the only way out will be either going through the mountains, which probably will be too dangerous, or having to get on boats and head off around to, say, White Harbour. So I think probably what the role for Timett Summer Timett is actually going to be off camera or off page, so to speak. I think that the decision will have to be made that if they're going to, if Littlefinger and the Knights of the Vale are going to move out of the Vale, and I think that he will move them out of the Vale, that they will not attempt it through the mountains because of Timett, son of Timett. So that is my current best guess on what role they will have. It will be a role in shaping the action rather than actually coming back into it personally. Damien Blork, thank you for the super chat. Hi, thoughts on the theory Lightbringer is in the crypts behind the crumbled wall and is what provides the heat for ore instead of the hot springs. So this is a North question, so I mean I will happily answer this one quickly now. Personally, I think not. I think there is something. So for those who don't know, in the crypts of Winterfell, there is a section, the very oldest section. There's been a cave-in of some kind. It is inaccessible. I think that we are probably going to get Mance Rayder having a look behind it in the Winds of Winter. I think that he's going to be hiding down in the Winterfell crypts there in the Winds of Winter. And he's the kind of person who likes to explore. So I think that he will probably look behind there. What will he find? I don't think it's going to be Lightbringer. I personally have a feeling that Lightbringer is going to be Dawn, the sword from House Dane. So I don't think that's what it is, but I do think that there will be a lot of interesting stuff going on there. I think that the hot springs are not heated. They are the hot springs. Let's not forget that they create a huge amount of boiling water, pretty much. It comes to the surface. It's just below boiling. It's hard, scalding to touch at times, and there's a lot of it. I don't think one sword would have been able to do all of that. I think that this is, among many things, this is George R. R. Martin trying to show us a link between that and, say, Dragonstone with the volcanic activity underneath. Question from, I think I had another question or two. Oh, yes. So, Kayvon Washington, thank you so much. Very generous super chat saying, thanks for all the great content. George R. R. Martin uses the concept history repeats itself. So I wonder if Dany will mimic Visenya by flying a Vale boy lord on a dragon to take the Vale. Any thoughts on that? So, yeah, this is a reference back to the original Targaryen invasion. And the original Targaryen invasion, the Vale was captured by and I forget the name of the Arryn Lord at the time, but he was a boy, and the dragon landed down, and he was given a dragon ride, circled around, and then decided, hey, we'll be on the Targaryen side. And that was how the Vale fell in behind the Targaryens. George R. R. Martin does indeed like to have not, I wouldn't say history repeating itself, but certainly history echoing. So yes, there's certainly a possibility of that. I don't think it would be exactly the same. So I think that the Eyrie itself in the books, they're now abandoning that for the winter. During the winter, they always come down from the Eyrie and then leave that. So we're not going to see that happen again. So the need for that to happen is it needs for a dragon to be there specifically to take the Eyrie, so to speak, is not going to be there. But in Fire and Blood, we did get another bit of referencing to dragons going off to the Eyrie. So again, George R. R. Martin is in Dance of the Dragons. So again, we're getting, in fact, actually Morning, I should probably say Morning, which was the last, as far as we're aware, the last dragon that was hatched that wasn't sort of disfigured and distorted and all the rest of it, that was hatched in the Vale. So the Is this foreshadowing in some way? Dany flying into the Vale and Robin Arryn flying, particularly given he keeps on talking about flying? It's entirely possible. What Dany will want to do is get allies, and if if Littlefinger has left the Vale by that point, which I think he probably will, he will spy the opportunity to get Sansa onto the into Winterfell as the ruling lady, and I think that he will probably leave behind whoever he thinks he has control of, whether that's Robin Arryn or Harry Harding. We'll come on to that in a moment. But yes, there is the possibility that we might see Dany trying to do that same trick again. Whether it would work, I don't know, but there is certainly a lot there, particularly with Robin Arryn talking about flying, that does seem to tee this up, let's put it that way. It's not quite the kind of Chekhov's gun that could certainly, looking back, could be seen as foreshadowing. Donald People saying, Hennessy privilege and in Deep Geek on my 40th name day. Oh, is it your birthday? Well, happy birthday to you. I shall raise my glass of water to you. I hope you have a fantastic day. Well, I hope you are having a fantastic day. Yes, happy birthday. Lefrenic, will Timett cross paths with Sansa and expose her identity? This is another really interesting possibility for Timett. I didn't mention it in the last one. Timett obviously is one of those rare people, because he was down in King's Landing with Tyrion. He is one of those rare people who does know who she is. In the Vale, she's there. She's pretending to be Littlefinger's bastard daughter, Elaine. And so some people are starting to maybe figure out who she is, but nobody's yet pointed the finger at her to say, you're Sansa Stark, are you? Who's going to do that? Well, could son of Timett do it? I like the idea. What I can't see at the moment is how this would come about, unless Littlefinger and Sansa head out through the Mountains of the Moon and get stopped by the Burned Men, which could happen, but you would expect them to go with a huge army. So I can't at the moment in my mind conceptualize how it would happen. But yes, this is very true that he is one of the few people who does know who she is. Question from Wex is a secret targ. In the Eyrie, Sansa builds Winterfell in the snow with Littlefinger's help. Is this foreshadowing her rebuilding Winterfell, or is it easy and too on the nose to see it that way? Yes, so she does. She's there and she builds this snow Winterfell, and then Robin Arryn comes with his doll and sort of stomps on it a bit. And lots of theories about what all of the symbolism of this is. I try and come in at the very least. What we've got going on here is a clear character development moment for Sansa, where she is trying to build a snow castle. And what is it that her heart wants? It's Winterfell. And that is not what it wanted at the start of these books. Now she's starting to come around to this understanding that that is where she wants to be. So that is, whatever else is going on there, that is a very important character moment for her, when she actually starts subconsciously to be recognizing that this is where her heart is and where she's wanting to be. In terms of the question of whether this is foreshadowing her rebuilding Winterfell, I think that that's entirely possible. I think that what Winterfell, it has had some rebuilding, but it needs a little bit more work, and probably after another battle or two up there, it will probably need even more work. The fact that she is the person who is overseeing this does seem to imply what she may well be doing is heading towards a position in Winterfell of overseeing the castle as a whole. Now, does that mean that she's going to be the ruling lady of Winterfell? Well, we've got Jon also, who's obviously got potential to have a claim there with Robb's will, but he is almost certainly going to be out and about doing stuff. So she, in any event, is probably going to be the Stark in Winterfell who is overseeing most of what is going on. So that's a rather rambly way around to say, yes, that could well be what it is. But I think that we so often look at this for symbolism of something else, and we mustn't lose sight of the fact that this is an important character moment for her as well. Question from Reflective Rambling. Hi there, saying, this is a question from Sasak. Thank you, Reflective Rambling. You do this a lot, and I'm always grateful picking up questions from other people in the chat. A lot of questions go through. I definitely do see questions when they're highlighted, but I can't always see the other ones. So when people do pick them up for other people, I really appreciate that. So will George use the presence of Sandor Frey in the Vale as something to get Sansa? It's also Stephanie B's birthday. Oh, well, Stephanie, happy birthday to you as well. So I think so. Sansa, I'll answer this perhaps in a roundabout way. Sansa in the Vale, what is going to be her story? Because by the end of the Winds of Winter, I firmly believe that she's going to end up at Winterfell. And what her story is that this is her time of slowly getting more volition over her own actions, slowly starting to see that it's possible for her to be in charge and not just doing whatever the controlling figure around her wants her to be doing. So that is what is happening here with this. And I think that this does end up with her one way or another being revealed as Sansa Stark. So this is the crucial point for me is not so much who is it who's going to be the person who finally reveals who she is. I think the crucial part is, what does all of this mean to her development to becoming the leader figure, the politically savvy figure that she seems to be heading towards becoming. So that for me is the key point. George R.R. Martin has left lots of different characters around here who might potentially know or figure out what's going on with Sansa. Some who may potentially be wanting to kidnap her and take her back to the Lannisters, some who may want to marry her, lots of different people. She is a hugely important figurehead still, because she is a Stark, but also because she is at this moment in time still married to Tyrion, so she is technically a Lannister as well. So what George R. R. Martin has done is created a huge amount of people who, if they knew who she was, would want things from her. And this bit of her story is getting to the point where she can reveal who she is and be strong enough for that not to matter. So that is where I think we're at. She will be going to Winterfell, yes, because Littlefinger wants her to, but also because she herself will want to. Sasak, I just see you in the chat saying, I think he won't help Sansa, but get her thinking about her fave non-sir. So Sandor, so the name link across to Sandor. I don't personally take the stance. I know there are some people who big fans of this idea of Sansa and Sandor being a part of some sort of a loving relationship. I don't personally buy into that. I certainly accept that there are lots of hints and things that you could interpret that way in the text if you wish. I don't personally think that's where it's going, but I think that one of the things, again, we need to see this from Sansa's character development perspective. One of the things that's happening again is her starting to see people for who they truly are, and understanding that Sandor, what he was like underneath that gruff exterior, and the fact that he actually in his own way was protecting her, is going to be an important part of this, in the same way that when we see her in the pre-release chapter from the Winds of Winter, she's thinking through, actually, you know what, Tyrion wasn't that bad, was he? He was actually, yeah, I might not have liked him much, but he wasn't horrible to me. In fact, in many ways, he was actually very gallant towards me. So this is a large part of what her thinking is, to start seeing behind the facade, and this will also ultimately, I think, lead her to the point where she can see beyond the facade of Littlefinger to what's truly going on behind him. But yes, Sasak, I think that's a good point about getting her to think again about Sandor. Question from BP23, saying, long time fan, first time watching live. Keep up the great work. Well, thank you so much, and welcome. It is a different experience watching live, and I hope you're enjoying it. So thank you. Let's go to some questions from my patrons. Lee Roberts says, hi Robert, hope you're doing well. I am, thank you very much. My question is about the mountain clans of the Vale. In the north, the clans are respected, and the head of the clan is seen as more of a petty lord than a chieftain of a clan. But in the Vale, the clans are seen as savages and are hated by most. Why is this? Would it not be more beneficial for the Vale to have clans on side? Yes, it's an interesting question. Why is it? Because they are, in many ways, they are very similar. So in the north, there are mountain clans in the mountains to the north of Winterfell. And as you rightly say, they are treated, if not exactly like lordly houses, they're certainly treated as being part of the wider northern community, rather than these outlaws and terrifying figures that seems to be the way that the mountain clans are viewed. So why is this historically? Well, I mean, there are lots of possible answers to this. One of them, I think, probably is the fact that in the north, they are the first men, and the worship of the old gods has stuck around, and so they actually see themselves as ethnically one, so to speak. So that's different to what is happening in the Vale, where most of the lordly class in the Vale, or at least half of it, are Andals, having come in as part of the slow Andal invasion. Certainly the Arryns were, and the mountain clans were first men who just were not invaded. They were not taken over, so they have retained their own ancient traditions without, which are very different to those of the lords in sort of to the east of them. So that I think for me is probably the main thing, and perhaps geopolitically, the Arryns have actually not minded too much the idea that they've got this the Mountains of the Moon, which are being patrolled and controlled by people who would attack anyone who comes in. It creates a great barrier preventing people from invading. Question from, I think I'm caught up on the chat, so let's keep going through questions from my patrons. Ariel Winchester saying, hello Robert, hope all is well. I've heard a few theories that Sweetrobin is actually Littlefinger's son not Jon Arryn's. What are your thoughts on this, and could it have an impact on the story if it's true? So I said I'd come to this. So this is a question which comes up quite a lot, and the George R. R. Martin has left it deliberately vague. He does this a lot, but on this one, I think it is absolutely deliberate. There are hints that maybe that they are that Robin Arryn is Littlefinger's son, and the language that Lysa uses, really, rather than Littlefinger himself, it could be interpreted either way. She talks about, let's make a brother for Robin, which you go, does that mean that you should have said a half brother, or is this just a way of saying, you know, I want where he is your son already, so let's have a brother for him. There's a lot there that could be interpreted either way, but we have to say this is a George R. R. Martin trope, as it were. This the father figure, and whatever it is, he has taken over as being this kind of father figure. This is what Littlefinger has tried to do, is to create himself as this father figure. It would create a degree of horrible irony if Littlefinger, who it would appear is trying to control and manipulate and possibly even poison, we'll get onto that in a moment, Robin Arryn, if that actually is his own son and he does not know it. There's at no point does he seem to hint that this is his son. It's only Lysa who perhaps sometimes hints. So that's why it's a little bit vague. Could he be? Possibly. This is almost certainly going to be one of those things that George R. R. Martin leaves hanging. For what it's worth, I think probably he is. He's the being this sort of sickly child and all the rest of it. There are maybe many reasons for this, but Littlefinger himself is never described as being like this hugely healthy, great figure of a man. But if you had to imagine what his child would be like, then perhaps not great at fighting, perhaps more obsessed with the powerful female figures in his life. That there is a link across there. So if I had to guess, I would say yes, but we have not been given the information that allows us to say for certain one way or the other. Gibberdole, thank you very much for the super chat, saying, hi Rob, sorry not about the Vale, but I forgot to ask last week. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the dwarf lady who visits the Brotherhood. So I assume that this is the Ghost of High Heart. Now, this is almost certainly the woodswitch, who has a very long history. This is about the Vale, so I won't go into huge amounts of details. This is a Riverlands question, but she almost certainly is the woodswitch who appeared with Jenny of Old Stones, who prophesied that the line of the prince that was promised is the one that goes down through Aerys II, that then hung around at Summerhall and then ended up at High Heart. This is almost certainly the same person. She knows things. You could call it prophecy. You could just call it true sight. There is certainly more than a hint that there is an element of the Children of the Forest there. Whether she actually is a child of the forest or has some of that in her heritage, we do not know. But this almost certainly is the same character that was there all that time ago, who is, with her colouring, this is George R. R. Martin likes to use colouring to draw attention to allegiances and things like that. She has got white skin and red eyes, like Bloodraven, like Ghost, like weirwood trees. That is where we're going with this, and that is very much what George R. R. Martin is wanting us to think about it. So she is old, she is very powerful, she's very knowledgeable, but almost nobody knows. And so she's there. If only people realized who she was, I suspect that there would be a lot more interest in her. Okay, so question. So Lady Leaf Underhill, a lot of chat about whether Robin Arryn is Littlefinger's child. She says she would have given you a son before she dies, when she's talking about all the things that she did for him, including murder. So she would have claimed that Sweetrobin was Littlefinger's son, if at all possible. Yep, absolutely. I think that's a reasonable bit of evidence that perhaps he's not. It's also possible that she doesn't know. This is maybe the first time then when she would know for certain who would be the father of her children. Berus Aurelius saying the way Littlefinger treats Robin makes it appear like he doesn't care about him at all. Yes, so I think that in any event, I don't think Littlefinger knows or thinks that Sweetrobin is his child. The question is whether Lysa knows or thinks that that's the case. And I think there's evidence that go both ways on this one. Question from Shashar. You have mentioned Littlefinger's grain scam a couple of times. To my shame, I've never actually picked up on that in the books. Could you please elaborate on what exactly he is doing and how that is communicated in the books? Okay, so this is something. There are a few hints in the properly published novels, but the biggest explanation we get of what's going on comes from the pre-release chapter from the Winds of Winter, the Elaine, the Sansa chapter. Now, what seems to have been happening at a basic level, there are, I'm sure, many extra layers to this. Littlefinger operates on a number of layers. Is he is stockpiling grain, and people are now starting to, because the Eyrie has got huge, it can hold years and years worth of supplies in there. People are now starting to offer good prices for grain because winter's on its way, and his lieutenants are coming to him and saying we should sell this because people are offering a lot of money, and he says nope, we're not going to sell it at all, we're stockpiling it. And then they say but if they don't buy it from us, they'll go and buy some from Jon Royce, for example, and he'll get loads of money from this because they're offering a good price for all this. And Littlefinger says, yep, that's true, but what will then happen is that in a year's time, Jon Royce will run out of grain and he will have to buy from us, at which point I will put the price even higher. So when it's a sort of a grain scam, there's a couple of elements to it. One, if you're trying to be charitable to him, this is entirely and eminently sensible to be stockpiling grain when winter is coming. It's sensible. But Littlefinger is trying to use this as a political tactic. He is trying to use this not to magnanimously feed the people of the Vale, but he is trying to use it so that when everybody else runs out of grain, they will be needing to come to him. He is going to be the person who has got all of the grain, and then he can decide what he does with this. Does he sell it to them at a huge amount of money? Does he hold on to it so that they starve? Does he get them to promise him fealty? What does he do? So this is the situation, which at the moment we've not had much on, but it's been dropped in there in a way that clearly makes us think, okay, so give it half a book, this is going to start getting quite important. So that's what seems to be going on with the grain scam. Catherine Fursith, saying, "Hi, Robert. Thanks for your great live streams. Thank you. I'm interested in Runestone and House Royce. What's the story of that place, origin of the house, their place in the history of the Vale of Arryn? Were they ever petty kings, for example? And what do you see as the end game for House Royce and the Knights of the Vale?" So House Royce are first men. Now, they were part of so they were in the Vale from right back in the day before the Andal invasion. But when the Andals came in, we often talk about the Andal invasion. This was a very slow invasion. They came in drips and drabs and all the rest of it. The Vale was the first place, but it wasn't just like one huge fleet suddenly arrived, like with the Rhoynar, and then what are you going to do when faced with this? They slowly came across, and people had to make up their mind. Each house had to make up their mind. What are they going to do? Are they going to fight against them? Are they going to marry into them? Are they going to try and trade with them? What's the plan? And the Royces seemed to be one of the more pragmatic types. They accepted the Andals came in. They stuck to where they were, Runestone, but they converted, it would appear, to the Faith of the Seven. Now, we don't have absolute confirmation of this because they are first men, and so there are obviously links across to the Weirwood, to the worship of the old gods, and they still remember, it would appear, we get this reference, but they have at the very least taken on the Andal culture. So they are knights. There are lots of Royce knights, and they have taken on the culture, which then spread across most of Westeros. So that is their sort of broad history. They were, yes, if you go back, they were petty kings in their place at the time. And since then, they have been one of the most powerful families in the Vale, to the extent that there is a cadet branch of them down near the Eyrie, and Nestor Royce, who was effectively running the Vale while Jon Arryn was off in King's Landing being Hand of the King. So they are a very important and strong family, and we also get hints, although it's not been said huge amounts about the runes. This seems very reminiscent of sort of first men kind of thing. We get lots of stuff etched onto stones and all the rest of it. That seems to be very much kind of magic-y feel there, as well as the bronze for the breastplate and things like that. So there is a history there that has not yet been fully unpacked. But although they remember, they do appear to have the sort of the old gods and all the rest of it. They do appear to have largely gone along with the new Andal invasion and embraced the new culture. Thank you very much, Super Sticker from Molly Wobbles. Good name, thank you. And question from Delphi Morphia, not a question, but it's just saying, love your work, thank you, please don't stop. Thank you, I will not. I certainly have absolutely no intention of stopping. I love doing this far too much. Mara Lee saying, on the show near the end, the character of Littlefinger did not have much to do except to try to pit Sansa and Arya against each other, which eventually led to his downfall. How do you see the downfall of Littlefinger in the books? Well, I think it will come in Winterfell. I think that this is the irony which will play out, which is that Ned Stark was out of his element when he came down to King's Landing with all the politics there. Littlefinger will be out of his element when he gets up to Winterfell with all the well, I would say the lack of politics there, but a lack of understanding of the people. Now, so I think that is where it is. He is going to go with this plan. So his grand plan appears to be he wants to just cause chaos, climb the ladder, and get control of as much of the Seven Kingdoms as he possibly can. He currently holds as the protector the Vale, and he will see Sansa as being the key to definitely the north and possibly also the Riverlands because of her heritage. It would not surprise me if he does also have half a mind to her Lannister link as well, but the main thing here, the main drive here will be to the Starks. Now, there has to be a Stark for the North to rally around, and I think that the Stark they will originally rally around will be Rickon, but Rickon will die, and then he will see, Littlefinger will see the opportunity that Rickon's dead, Bran is missing, who knows where Eyrie has gone, and he has got Sansa, and so he will think, I can bring Sansa up and install her as the Lady of Winterfell, and added to the Vale, therefore I then got 2 of the kingdoms, and that is where his mind is going. But when he goes up there, that's the point at which it will all start unraveling for him. Yes, he might try and pitch Stark against Stark. There will definitely be, it won't be the way they did it on the show, don't worry, but there will definitely be a lot of competing interests with the Starks, because of the fact that you will have people trying to rally behind Rickon, but also when Bran reappears, then some people will look at him and go, actually, you know what? He is the rightful ruler of Winterfell. He's now the next oldest son. By the normal rules of Stark succession, he should be taking over. Jon probably will be legitimized in Robb's will, and so he will also have a very clear claim. And so suddenly we have lots of different Starks who've all got claims to Winterfell. And he will definitely try to play people off one against another. I don't think it's going to be the same, as I say, don't worry, I don't think it's going to be the same as on the show, but the ultimate end will come with the revelations and the unraveling of what happened, what Littlefinger has been up to. And this will be all about Sansa suddenly gaining control and realizing, you know what, I'm no longer under his protection. He is now under my protection, and that is going to be the twist that leads to his downfall at the end. Question from NJ, Littlefinger to kill Rickon? No, I don't think so. I think that will be Ramsay. We've got slight distraction here, but we had the detail which was added in by George R.R. Martin that Ramsay had trained his pack of hounds to be hunting humans and wolves, and I think that is very clearly pushing this to the point where we can say Ramsay will be wanting to get rid of any Stark pretenders, and if he hears that there is Rickon returning, then he will hunt him down. And I think that is where Rickon's time will go, and this will lead to the position of the Great Northern Conspiracy having pulled everyone together behind this idea that finally we have a Stark that we can place. We can get rid of the Boltons. We have a Stark Rickon that we can place into Winterfell and all rally behind. The moment that they've got rid of the Boltons, that also Rickon disappears, is killed, and then suddenly, well, what now? That seems to be where this is heading. Question from Maester Mansa saying, I had a question come to me while listening to the recording of last week's live stream. You mentioned that the rivers are freezing with the onset of winter, and that made me think of the twins. It could turn the castle's greatest defensive strength into a huge weakness. It can now be attacked from almost anywhere. Any thoughts? Also, to link to the Vale, winter is advantageous to Littlefinger with his grain scheme, but it also forces him out of the Eyrie, where he's more vulnerable if people start to see through his lies. Any thought on this? Well, quickly on the twins, yes, it does. I think that we can expect to see most of the rivers in the sort of the northern half of Westeros freezing over. That will lead to huge amounts of different tactical positions, and places like Riverrun suddenly are going to be a very different prospect as well. Try if you wish to take Riverrun, and the snows have started falling in Riverrun. So yes, I don't, however, think that. Well, when you say it could turn the castle's greatest defensive strength into a huge weakness, it could be attacked from almost anywhere. I think that this does add to the possibility that it will get attacked, not just from an insider, but also this. I can't escape the visual, which I love. The super pack of wolves just charging into the twins. Which allows them to avenge, or Nymeria to avenge Grey Wind, who was killed there. That will be a very personal vengeance there, along with Lady Stoneheart's vengeance more broadly. As for the Eyrie and the fact that Littlefinger's leaving it, and therefore he's more vulnerable. Yes, he is. Absolutely, he's more vulnerable. But what he's trying to do is, firstly, we've got the Lords Declarant, who were the lords who in the Vale, who basically said we don't think that we want you to be Lord Protector, but he managed to wheedle his way out, and he's bought himself a year from them. So that is where he's at, and that in that year is where he's going to be starting to do his grain scam. But he's also trying to use this time through Sansa, through the creation of this the new knightly order, to try and rally support around him and Robin Arryn as the figurehead. So does it make him more vulnerable? Yes, to attack, but I think it opens up the possibility of more politicking, because it's open to more people. Instead of having to traipse all the way up to the top of the Eyrie, suddenly there are a lot more people there, and then that allows Littlefinger to be a lot more in his element. So I don't think that it places him in more danger. I think what he's done is what he needed to do, which was buy himself the time for his grain scheme to work, and then he's going to try and work from there to set up something slightly longer term. Whitney Davis saying, have you decided on a topic for next week? Just wondering, keep up the great work. Thank you very much. Next week, well, she'll use this as the moment just to quickly say what's coming up. Next week, I'm trying to move through the different areas of Westeros. So let's do the Westerlands next, as we're sort of moving vaguely north to south-ish. So Casterly Rock and the all of that area there, under the Lannister realm. So that's what we're going to be doing next week. I'll take this moment as well to say, patrons, thank you. What I'm going to do with my patrons, always I prioritize my patrons' questions in these live streams. Also, at different levels of my Patreon, you get different benefits. At the $10 level, what I should be asking next my patrons is, what do I do on these live streams once I've finished going through Westeros and the different regions? What should we cover after that? So that's going to be a question at some point in the next couple of weeks. That's at $10 level. $5 level, incidentally, you get access to all of the audio I do. So if you want to support the channel, or you want to get access to some of those benefits, then please do check out Patreon. There is a link down in the description. I think that's probably it in terms of stuff that's coming up. Keep an eye out for a video, if you're a Song of Ice and Fire fan, a video that I hugely enjoyed putting together. It's been a question I've been asked for ages, and it's been nagging at the back of my brain. Did the Maesters kill the dragons the first time around? I tried to answer that, but along the way, I also came to the surprising conclusion that there is a moment in Westerosi history, it's not ever really highlighted, where the Maesters, the Grand Maester at the time, had absolute control over the Seven Kingdoms. Grand Maester Muncan, who was there at that particular time, was the regent to a king who never left his room, as well as being Hand of the King, the sole regent, as well as being Hand of the King and the head of the Maesters, and not having a small council to answer to. For a few months, What could he have done during that time? So that's something that I uncovered when I was going through this that just really struck me, is that no one ever draws attention to what really was. I mean, was it an actual coup attempt, or was it just an accident of history? Whatever it was, suddenly Grand Maester Munchen was the most important person, the most powerful person in the history of the Seven Kingdoms. And we're told he was reticent to talk about what happened then. So that video is coming out hopefully at some point in the next few days. It's one that I really enjoyed putting together. Okay, let's go back to questions from my patrons. Question from me, Fidiosa, saying, hello, Robert. I hope you and Dan the dog are well. Thank you. I've been curious to hear your thoughts concerning the similarities of Sweetrobin sitting in a Weirwood throne, notable since they failed to grow living ones there, and its echoing of Bloodraven sitting in a living Weirwood. Do you think Sweetrobin is being influenced by the throne, noting his erratic behavior, etc.? And could the throne be another form of corrupted Weirwood like the shade of the evening trees? I can't shake the feeling that there is some sort of connection or theme between a sickly boy sitting on a throne made of trees that grew sickly and failed to root in the Vale. Love your channel. It has been a constant comfort through the pandemic. Thank you very much for that. So yes, there is a Weirwood throne that Sweetrobin sits on that is in the Vale. Now, this is not the only Weirwood throne. You've already noted Bloodraven sitting in one. Beric Dondarrion, when we're introduced to him, also is introduced as sitting in effectively a Weirwood throne. As part of the Brotherhood Without Banners in the roots of the Weirwood. So are we being invited to see links? Well, yes. I don't think that there's definitely the thematic links are there. You drew out some of them there. Obviously, Beric has got a lot of these kind of links across with the one eye to Bloodraven as well. Sweetrobin, we've already talked about the links about this infatuation with flying. So the links are definitely there. But my take is more that the Weirwood tree, the Weirwood throne, is a dead Weirwood. It is not connected to the Weirwood network, and we have to understand that the Weirwood network is a connection of living Weirwoods. So that is where the magic is with the Weirwood network. And so when Jaime gets his Weirwood vision, it's because he's got his head on a stump. And yes, the tree might have been chopped down, but the stump is still attached through the roots to the Weirwood network. The Weirwood throne is just a really cool throne. It used to be magical. Perhaps it does still retain some memories or something like that. Perhaps this is what is going on there. But I think that we need to see the clear distinction between the memories that may be in Weirwood and it being a living part of the Weirwood network. And those, I think, are very different things. So whereas what Bloodraven is doing is he can influence events in and out and through that, he cannot influence what is happening to Robin Arryn through that dead, cut-off bit of Weirwood. So that, I think, is the key distinction there. I think we're being invited to see what could have been as much as anything else. He could have been something more or greater, but he is not, because of a huge amount of other things going on. And this is the hint also as to the connectedness of the Weirwood network. We often state it as fact, but one of the biggest clues for the connectedness of the Weirwood network is the fact that they wanted to have a Weirwood tree at the top of the Eyrie, but they could never, no matter how much soil they brought up, they could never get it to actually take root because it needs to be able to connect. And the Eyrie is got a huge amount of stone of a mountain, and it just could not connect. Jibbadol saying, hi Rob, thanks for answering. You're welcome. Got one more question. Maybe you've already answered, but who do you think will end up in the Eyrie? I'm hoping tribesmen. I mean, at the very end of the story at the Eyrie, mean, I think there's a chance. There's a chance it's Robin Arryn. He could survive. There's no. He will stay alive, I think, for as long as Littlefinger needs him or wants him to be alive. And in the short term, he does want him to be alive. So if he does survive and he survives Littlefinger getting out, then the people in the Vale will try and keep him alive. And it would not surprise me, once you get rid of Littlefinger's influence, and Lysa's influence has gone as well, if he does have a bit of a growth spurt, become slightly less sickly. There are hints that he is being poisoned to a degree as well as perhaps epilepsy or whatever it is that he suffers from. So once you get Littlefinger's influence out, perhaps he will strengthen. I actually personally hope that that's the case. In terms of the clansmen, I think there is a... I mean, it would be tinfoil, but if Tyrion ends up in a position of power as, say, Hand of the King at the end of all of this, for him to gift the Eyrie to son of Timett would be wonderful. If there are no Arryns left, and let's face it, Robin Arryn is basically the last Arryn, so yes, there's always next in line somewhere, but he is effectively the last of the Arryns, and once he's gone, it would be in the gift of whoever is the king to decide who goes there. So if Bran doesn't really care, then maybe Tyrion could decide to gift it to one of his most loyal servants. So I like that as I say, it's a long way in the future, and I think that George R. R. Martin would have to build up to it a little bit, but I like it very much as an idea. Will Foran saying, will Sweetrobin die at the hands of Lyn Corbray? A theory I read and can't help but believing. Yes, Lyn Corbray is badass. I think I still come round to the idea that he will stay alive for as long as Littlefinger wants him to stay alive. I don't think most of the Vale Lords will rally around him, and the thing that they do not like is, because he is the rightful Lord of the Vale, what they do not like is Littlefinger, who has come in and is now ruling, and they very much suspect probably killed, if not Jon Arryn, then certainly Lysa Arryn. They're very suspicious. But they do not have it in for Robert Arryn, and so he will be protected. So yes, there are lots of ways that he could die. He's not exactly the kind of robust personality who will be able to survive much, but I think he might. I think he might survive. Coasting ATC saying, do you think Janos bragged off page to Jon about betraying Ned and Littlefinger's role in it and being part of Littlefinger's downfall? This Janos Slint. I think if it was done off page, then probably we would read about it in one of Jon's chapters, his thinking about it. So I think probably not. The fact is that there are lots of loose ends that Littlefinger has left. Sansa knows that he killed her aunt, but for nothing else, she knows what was going on there. She also was a witness to what was happening down at King's Landing. So I don't think that there's going to be any, and obviously when Bran appears, he will know what was being going on all over the place. So I don't think there's going to be a lack of evidence for when we get there. What is needed is the power dynamic to change, to be a position where Sansa can turn on Littlefinger, and that I think is what's going to be there. So might Janos Slint have said something? Maybe, but I haven't seen any evidence for it, I have to say, and I don't think that it's needed. Question from Eric Ferg saying, how did Mia Stone escape being murdered by the Lannisters like Robert's other bastards? Is it more of a distance issue, or that she is more acknowledged than Gendry, the baby of the brothel, etc.? So Mia Stone is Robert Baratheon's oldest illegitimate child. She is the person who guides people up and down the giant's lance, and although it's never made entirely clear whether she knows about her parentage, it certainly seems to be an open secret in the Eyrie and in the Vale of who she is. Ned certainly seems to remember her. So yes, she was known, and she will have been known to Cersei. In fact, I think there was even a moment when Robert Baratheon suggested that maybe he could bring her or one of his other bastard children into King's Landing, and she wasn't having any of it. So the fact that Cersei and others know that she exists is pretty incontrovertible. The fact that Cersei would want to kill all of Robert Baratheon's bastard children, and for that matter, Joffrey would, is also, I think, incontrovertible. But it is a matter of who she can. There were twins, apparently, in Lannisport that she obviously had an ability to get rid of, and those in King's Landing she had an ability to get rid of. What she could not do was go to the Eyrie. So it's simply a matter of how far does her reach stretch, and she wouldn't be able to get to the Eyrie. So I think it's distance, but it's also a matter of political control. Eric Ferg saying, why do you think the author included the detail of Bronze Jon being such a great fighter, defeating Ned and Roderick, etc.? It's a good question. I don't. The question is whether he's, and we always read a lot into these kinds of things. Is this being set up for some reason? There are always going to be good fighters, and so Jon Royce was set up as being a good fighter. He's not necessarily set up as the best fighter, but certainly he had a few matchups against people that we know are good fighters and defeated them. But he's a bit older now. Is this being set up for something, or is this just to show that he's, or not even to show anything? Is it just because he is, and there is somebody in the Vale? We're always told the Knights of the Vale are this great fighting force, but who are the amazing fighters in the Vale? We have to have a few names of some amazing fighters in the Vale. So having Jon Royce there is part of building up the bigger picture of the fact that the Knights of the Vale are very impressive. Is there a smaller picture for him personally? Maybe there is a tourney that's going to be happening very soon. Maybe he will have some role in that. He was the person, I think, incidentally, who knighted Harry Harding. So there's definitely a link across there. Will that play into anything in the politics? Well, I think that if he wishes to make a point, he is then able to during that tourney. So the short answer is we do not know if there's a specific reason for this. If it is, I think it's at the tourney. We do know that there's a general reason for it, which is to show us the power and strength of the Vale army as a whole, which all through this has been kept back. Let's not forget, this is the War of the Five Kings has been raging all over the place. The Lannister army's been out and about. The Riverlands army has obviously been involved. We've got the North has been involved. We've not seen the Vale. Their forces have been held back, so they are at maximum strength. So when they do appear, then they are going to be very impressive. Lornduck20 saying, do you think Miranda now knows who Sansa really is, since she blurted out Jon Snow's name? And Eric, that was Lornduck20. Eric Fogel also asking about Miranda. This is Miranda Royce being jealous of Sansa marrying Harry Harding and appears to have trapped her into revealing who she is. What do you see happening here? So Miranda Royce is the daughter of Nestor Royce, who is the person who has effectively been ruling the Vale all this time. And she comes up to meet Sansa and accompanies her down from the Eyrie down the Giants' Lance, and she seems to be sort of, yes, trying to ingratiate herself with Sansa, because Sansa is pretending to be Littlefinger's daughter, and so this is clearly, if anyone's involved in politics in the Vale, a very important figure. Even if they don't know that she's Sansa, she's still a very important political figure. And the question is, does she know that who Sansa is? And I think probably at the moment, no. She does, you're right, blurt out Jon Snow's name, but this is in the middle of talking about who is taking control in various places across Westeros, and even it's sort of trying to do down Sansa for being a bastard child, but then sort of saying, but yeah, there's even a bastard child who's taken over the Night's Watch. Jon, it must be Snow if he's a bastard child in the north. So that's basically what comes out. It comes out as relatively natural rather than a do you know Jon Snow? Is he your half brother kind of thing? It's not, doesn't come across as probing, but it does. She is definitely blurting it out. There's a lot of talk about the roles of illegitimate children, particularly also with Mia Stone being there as well. Miranda is a formidable political figure in the Vale, and she is trying to suss out Sansa, or Elaine as she thinks of her. And this is what is going on here. Will she figure out who she is? It's possible. Littlefinger deliberately warns Sansa about her and says, she comes across as being this sort of warm and chatty figure and all the rest of it, but she's very clever underneath it all. So Littlefinger has been warning Sansa about this. So her role, even if she does not figure out who Sansa is, her role is to show Sansa, again, thinking about Sansa's development, to show Sansa how to be a positive, political, intelligent female leader. And so far, she's obviously had Cersei that she can be learning from, but the other figures that she's had around her have been quite dominant. Well, Cersei's obviously been quite dominant and manipulative, but this is providing her with a bit more of a role model, and also somewhere that she can sharpen her own political abilities. So that is the clear role for her within the story. Will she figure out who Sansa is? Well, it's possible. I don't think that she has already. I think that it's possible to overinterpret that mention of Jon Snow. I think that was her just trying to suss out on the basis of her being Elaine, not on the basis of her being Sansa. And yes, there is a sort of trying to do her down, mentioning the fact that she's an illegitimate child, because she is trying to bolster her own claim to be marrying Harry Harding, Harry the heir. That would be for her the best way to be gaining power. And suddenly Littlefinger's come in, and he's clearly trying to matchmake Harry with his own supposed daughter. That is then setting Miranda against Sansa. So what we've got here is that this is increasingly going to be Sansa working her way out of these situations rather than Littlefinger doing it for her. Lorne Duck 20. What do you think is Lord Robin Arryn's end game? Do you see him making the end like in the TV show? If he does die, how do you see it happening, and who rules the Vale at the end? So, as I said a bit earlier, I think my instinct tells me that he probably will survive. And it's partly actually because this is a very George R. R. Martin thing, is that he is not the big fighter. He's not the person that you think definitely this person's clever enough to survive. Those kind of people, the Varys's, the Littlefingers, they're not going to survive. The great fighters are not going to survive. The people who survive are going to be the broken people. They are the ones who are going to inherit, and Robin Arryn is one of those. And so instinctively, I think that he survives, and I think that he probably will rule at the end of it all in the Vale. So that's my best guess. Could he be killed? Yes, at any point by anyone. And yes, you can come up with 100 different possible ways that he might do it, that he might die. But I think it's much more George R. R. Martin-y for him to not die at all, but actually to somehow survive. Alana saying, bonjour, Robert, bonjour. The Vale chapters in the last books have got me thinking about Sansa as a Stark. The links between Arya and Lyanna in their personality and looks are clear, but it seems fair to say that Sansa is the other side of Lyanna's coin. She's no quick thinker and is or was a hopeless romantic. You often ask us to put ourselves in Arya's shoes when discussing how Lyanna would react to certain things, but it seems Sansa feels them as well in her own way, especially as she grows and becomes more self-assured. As a character, she's always felt somewhat set aside from the other Starks because of her own Southron ambitions, but when I think about the Lyanna parallels, I find myself rethinking this. She's always maintained her Stark sense of honour and compassion, but how will we see Sansa becoming more Starkish in the future books? And will it be the realisation of her family not being totally decimated that will give her the shot in the arm to start to distance herself from Littlefinger? Really interesting thought process going on there. I think the thing we don't know about Lyanna is that, yes, there's lots of the Lyanna Arya kind of links. We've shown that again and again and again, just how they look as well as the kinds of things that they like and their spirit. Ned mentions this. What we don't know is the extent to which she does have these kind of Sansa sensibilities. Yes, she was interested. Yeah. Southron ambitions is perhaps a bit too vague, I think, to be. It would perhaps explain Sansa, but a bit too vague to talk about Lyanna. She did, it would appear, fall in love with somebody in a way that Arya hasn't. She's much younger, obviously, but in a way that Sansa certainly imagined herself doing. So yes, there are some of these similarities there across the piece. In terms of how Sansa becomes more Starkish, I think this is really important because I've been saying all through this, and Sansa will end up going north and going to Winterfell and all the rest of it. But we have to remember that the whole reason, or one of the whole reasons why Robb wrote his will was because, yes, he thought lots of his family were dead, but also the Northern Lords would not accept Sansa as the Stark leader, head, because of the fact that she married a Lannister. So this, I think, is the thing that needs perhaps the most work for her, is not just how does she become more Starkish. I think that will become apparent as she heads up, and I think heads up north, and I think that she will be more Starkish simply by getting to the north. I think it's how will she be perceived as being more Starkish. I think that a lot of the Northern Lords will still be very suspicious of her, and so particularly if she's coming up with Littlefinger as well. So I think that she will not be immediately welcomed with open arms as being, yes, of course, this is our natural Lady of Winterfell. There will be a lot of suspicion there, and I think that we will need to get the marriage between Sansa and Tyrion officially annulled, and this may be that it's always easy to overinterpret what George R. R. Martin says to questions on matters of detail, but he was asked ages ago about who could annul a marriage, and he basically says the High Septon. For Sansa and Tyrion, he says the High Septon, and she would have to ask for that herself, and that seems to imply that she would have to out herself as a Stark, and she would have to admit where she is. Now, I don't think that's going to happen until she gets up to either Winterfell, or the decision is made by Littlefinger and her to out herself in the Eyrie. But that, I think, has to happen before she gets full acceptance up in the north. The Lannisters are still absolutely loathed and hated, and if she is still technically a Lannister and starts coming out with, oh, but actually Tyrion was not that bad, that is not going to work well for the Northern Lords. Diego Godoy saying, hola Robert, hola. Could you comment on Jon Arryn's achievements in Robert's rebellion? Was he the leader of the Vale's army? Did he participate in any of the battles? If not, what important role did he play in the rebellion? Yes, so he was not he was the general of the Vale armies, but he was not the sort of the figurehead leader that Robert Baratheon was. Robert Baratheon, we're told, battle after battle, he would go in, wading into the middle of the battle with his warhammer, hunting down the opposition leader, and then he would try and take them on one-to-one. That was not Jon Arryn's style. He was more of the sort of the general of his army. He did have battles to fight. There was the first battle was in Gulltown. Robert Baratheon led the charge on that one, but Jon Arryn was also involved. And then after that, we're not really told about them because obviously our story cares more about Ned and Robert, but he did have to then corral the Vale, which was divided. We think that the North was all behind the Starks in this, but other parts of the Seven Kingdoms were not, and they were being asked to choose between their liege lord and their king, and some of them chose their king and some of them chose their liege lord. So he had to secure the Vale first, and that required him to be almost certainly fighting a few more extra battles in the Vale, and then he moved his forces out. He was there at the Battle of the Bells going into the Battle of the Trident. So he was definitely involved in these things. He wasn't at the heart of the battle like Robert Baratheon was, but he was definitely involved. Nobody stood up and said, you didn't play your part. But at the same time, nobody gave him any particular name checks for great bravery in battle either. That's where he was. He doesn't appear to have been a particularly great warrior, but also he wasn't holding back. Henry Fairbairn says, hello, Robert. I seem to remember from the World of Ice and Fire that the North and the Vale fought over the Sisters Island group and that the Vale prevailed. However, the islands seem to be quite independently minded, so I'm wondering what benefit they bring to the Overlord. Do you know if they pay taxes or dues, or if they supply levies for their armies? It's a good question. Because the Sistermen, the three sisters, act relatively independently. The implication is that yes, they must provide some levies, they must support at times, and all the rest of it, but generally speaking, they run their own affairs. Why then would people fight over them if they're not going to do all that much? Yes, they appear to have some nice clam soup or something like that they can sell off and around and all the rest of it, but I think it's actually purely strategic importance. You get the North, we talked about this when we were talking about the North, the only major harbour in the North is White Harbour. That is the access to the North. if you don't want to go by the road through the neck, and that's entirely understandable, lots of people didn't want to go through the neck on the King's Road, and to be honest, the King's Road is relatively recent. It's only been there for a couple of 100 years. Before that, yes, there was a track going through, but it wasn't as well maintained. So the main route to the north was through to White Harbour, but that area there, that patch of sea we've got there, the Bight, is there are storms. It's quite a dangerous little journey to head across to between the Vale and the north there. So the islands in the middle are of quite important strategic or quite strategically important. In the same way, also, not just for somewhere to shelter from storms, but in the same way also that you get Dragonstone and Driftmark are very important because of the fact that the Blackwater Bay, they are there at the sort of the entrance to it, controlling trade coming in and out. And if they wish to do a blockade, then they could do that. And so that's why the sisters are important, because of the strategic importance to the north, and also because they help shelter the Vale. So that's why the north wanted to get them, and the Vale were wishing to prevent them. It's not particularly to do with their the levies for armies. It's not particularly to do with their economic benefits. It's for military and strategic importance for holding that part of water. Good night, Carolina. Thank you so much for the super chat saying, howdy, Robert. Joined late. Skip if covered. I'll listen later. But what role do you see the Brotherhood of Winged Knights playing in the Winds of Winter or the Dreamer's String? So this is the tourney that I've mentioned is happening. This is to choose the champions. The idea, everyone's doing it. These days it would appear to get a Kingsguard equivalent of these Winged Knights who are the champions of the Vale. Now, what role are they going to play? Well, I think that there's a short-term role. It's a political play for who is actually protecting Robin Arryn. Clearly, Littlefinger will want to make sure that he gets his people in there, but also, and using the tournament to garner support for himself and goodwill and all the rest of it. So there's a short-term element going on there. The longer term, then they are basically just knights, probably with some nice shiny wings on their helmet or something like that, who we will see at some point accompanying Littlefinger and Sansa to the north. So that's, I think, where we're going to see them. It's as much a declaration of sort of independence as much as not pure independence for the Vale, but the moment that you start creating a sort of a Kingsguard sort of group, then of elite soldiers, then you are immediately starting to say that you're separate to a degree from the rest of the Seven Kingdoms. Question from Jay Chef. Thank you so much. People see Littlefinger as some cunning person, but the text says clearly that he is not small, sneaky, scheming boy, but a bold man who would give his all in for victory. Any thoughts on the personality of Peter in the books? Well, this is one thing I'm looking forward to. I'm doing a reread or re-listen to the books as we go through. I've never listened to them but on audiobooks, and so I'm listening to them for the first time on audiobooks, and I am literally just about to be introduced to Littlefinger for the first time, where I'm at. If you're interested in my thoughts, incidentally, as we go through that, I'm putting them on Twitter whenever I do a chapter at a time, and just do a few thoughts there on Twitter after each chapter. But so I'm looking forward to listening to his character as opposed to just reading it. But in terms of his character in the books, I think he's cunning, yes, but it's more, in a way, he's quite brave. I think this is a thing that we don't, because he's not a good person. He's not a nice person. He's really quite horrible. but he's an opportunist, and he does push himself 100% into whatever he is doing. And that's what I mean by saying he's brave, is that he is absolutely, nothing's going to stop him. He threw Lysa Arryn out of the Moon Door and then lied about it blatantly, despite the fact that it was in front of witnesses. So this takes a huge amount of strength of character to do. Now, you saying a bold man who would give his all for victory, yes, but I think that the character of him is the kind of character that he doesn't ever just accept the victory of where he's at. I think perhaps this is the main driving force. Is so he's got this weird relationship with Catelyn that he sort of takes across to Sansa, obviously, but this means that he can never have the thing that he fundamentally wants. He can never have Catelyn Stark now. He can't. That's just a thing that can't ever happen. And each step along the route of what he's doing, he cannot sit still and enjoy it. He becomes in charge of the Gulltown. This is in his much younger days, sort of collecting the monies and the revenues in Gulltown. That was a big win, but he can't accept that. He has to go on to become Master of Coin in King's Landing, and he can't accept that. He has to be going on, pushing onwards, getting the Vale. He has to collect the North. He cannot ever stop and accept, you know what, I'm now in a position that I just want, I'm happy. So I think this is my roundabout way of saying that, yes, we could see all of these things about him that we could say he's bold, we could say he's an opportunist. He's definitely all of those things. He is clever. He's probably not as clever as he thinks he is, but he is clever. But fundamentally, I think he's sad. I think he's aiming for something that he will never ever achieve, and I think that is probably what drives him to keep on going. Secretly inside, I think that he knows he's never ever going to achieve the thing that he wants, so he just has to keep on going until he can't go any further. It's I think he's quite a hard character to feel sorry for, but when you dig down inside him and try and understand his character as a whole, I don't think he started out as being an evil person. He started out being really hurt, and he started out wanting desperately something that he could never have, and I think it's that hollowness inside him that drives him on. This sadness that he can never actually get. He can achieve and achieve and achieve and achieve, but he's never actually going to get the one thing that he desperately wants. Wex is a secret. Yeah, I'm not going to. I'm trying not to make anyone feel bad for Littlefinger. I don't think he's a sympathetic character at all. But to try and understand what drives him, you have to be able to get down to the fact that from his perspective, he was madly in love with a woman that he could never have. And that is the starting point for everything. Question from, and I think I've got about 3 or 4 more questions from my patrons now. Question from Melissa Gill saying, didn't Robert Baratheon name Jaime as Warden of the East? Wouldn't that make him military commander of the Vale? Whatever happened with that? So what happened with that was that Tywin eventually returned it to the Arryns, the title. So he took it off of Jaime because he wanted Jaime to then leave the Kingsguard and to be Warden of the West. He wanted Jaime to follow him as being the Lord of Casterly Rock, and that is Warden of the West, not Warden of the East. So he gave it back as part of his politicking, and as I said, as part of his wanting to gain influence across all of Westeros. So that was what happened there. Have you heard the theory that Tyrek Lannister is Byron the Handsome from the Sansa preview chapter? I really like that theory. It seems very plausible. What do you think? So Tyrek Lannister, for those who don't know, he was one of the many Lannisters. There are lots of them in the books that we didn't get on the show, but he disappeared. He was a Lannister cousin. He disappeared during the rioting in King's Landing. When Marcella went off to Dawn, then there was lots of rioting, and you can probably remember it actually from the show. Sansa was there, and Sandor saved her and rescued her from the mob, and everybody made their way back up to the Red Keep. But in the books, there are definitely people who just got killed and all the rest of it. One of them was Tyrek Lannister, who was a squire, I believe. Now, could he be this Byron the Handsome, who's got a sort of a walk-on part in the pre-release chapter? I mean, he could, but my take on these things, as you know, is I don't see a plot reason why he should be. Why would a random Lannister suddenly appear as a random someone else in the Vale? That doesn't seem to make sense. And added to which, for the riot to actually mean something rather than just lots of people angrily waving things around, then it does have to have had some fatalities. It does have to have had some consequences. And so I think people do need to have died. And George R. R. Martin showed this in Fire and Blood. There were various riots in King's Landing. So this is sort of par for the course for King's Landing, really. But in all of the instances, then there's always someone who died as a result. Riots were deadly, and I think that if this riot was not deadly, then I think it was. I think it was. And I think that this is showing us the power of mob rule in King's Landing that's happened again and again. Mara Lee saying on the show, the Knights of the Vale helped Jon Snow win back Winterfell at the Battle of the Bastards. What role do you see the Knights of the Vale playing in the last two books? Yes, so I think just building on what I've said on them, so I think the Knights of the Vale will come out, and I think that this will be from the Vale. I think that they will end up in the north. I think that they're not just going to be this great group who appear just to save the day. They will probably play a positive role in the north, in the facing up against the others, but I don't think they're going to be this great force to come in the Battle of the Bastards, to come in and save Jon Snow and all the rest of it. I don't think that's the way it's going to work there, but I think they will end up going north, and I think that we will see them as a force facing up against the others rather than a force facing up against the Boltons. Greasy Strangler saying, hi Robert, George R. R. Martin criticised the way Gandalf and the Riders of Rohan turned up out of nowhere and saved the day in Lord of the Rings. The showrunners essentially did this with the Knights of the Vale in the Battle of the Bastards. Do you think George R. R. Martin is planning anything like that in the Winds of Winter with the battle between Stannis and Ramsay? I expect not, but would be good to get your thoughts on what battle or arc you think they'll be part of. So again, just building on this point, the timing here is really quite important. So the battle between Stannis and the Boltons has to happen quite soon, because the first battle, which is going to be the Freys and the Manderleys and Stannis's army, that's about to happen in the first few chapters of the Winds of Winter. We've already been told that. That's nailed down. The Knights of the Vale are nowhere near. They're not going to be involved in that at all. Then we'll have to have a second battle, which is actually getting into Winterfell in some way. Now, that has to happen reasonably soon, because at the moment, Stannis' army is basically freezing to death in the cold. They have to get into Winterfell soon, or it'll be game over for them. Ditto the Manderley forces that I think will be left outside. Thankfully for them, they've got a lot of people inside Winterfell who can open the gates and things like that, I'm sure. But there will be a battle happening there. All of which is to say that the timing of those battles is probably too soon for the Knights of the Vale to arrive up in to help out with it. It's possible that we might have Melisandre doing the magic with killing Shireen, which brings effectively a little bit of false spring, getting rid of the winter and the snows, and then allowing the force from the Castle Black to be heading down, as was going to be the plan before Jon got killed, as well as Stannis to stay alive. So it's possible that there might be that delay there, but we shouldn't underestimate the amount of time it will take the Knights of the Vale to get from the Vale to Winterfell, and they are still in nowhere near ready to leave. So I think that we're not going to see them arrive until the end of the Winds of Winter. And I think the Boltons will have been dealt with earlier on than that. So I think that the timing does not work really for that. This is, even if the Knights of the Vale immediately went down to Gulltown, caught a boat and up to White Harbour, and then headed up to Winterfell from there, even in the best of weather, then you're talking, this is a few months, and a lot will happen in a few months. Okay, I've got one more question from my patrons. So if you've got any more questions in the chat, now is the time to drop them in there. I will try to answer as many questions as I can. Lady Dane, was the Vale of Arryn always as dangerous as it is with Lysa in charge? It seems like the situation with the mountain tribes would not be acceptable to a stronger ruler. Also, with Jon Arryn away in King's Landing for years, did the peacefulness of the Vale decline? We're not told these things, but clearly the implication is that the Lords of the Vale are not strong enough or are happy for the mountain clans to stay there. So they're either not strong enough to get rid of them, or they're happy for them to stay there. I personally think that there's probably a pragmatic element to allowing them. I mean, they're not going to gain any economic advantage from holding the mountains, and they are going to, so they would lose a huge amount of troops by trying to root out all of these mountain clans. So pragmatically, what does it actually gain them? Not huge amounts. So I think that's one element there. But yes, and there's another element that the Knights of the Vale, knights and mountains, don't work particularly well together. That's not, if you've got lots of mounted troops, then you want a nice flat plain, and you don't want lots of up and downy mountains. So they probably didn't have the best troops to do it in any event. So it is curious that this situation has survived for so long. But the fact is that even the Targaryens, I mean, they made a half-hearted attempt at it, but they just went, yeah, that doesn't matter. We'll just leave them. That's fine. So it doesn't. It's an inconvenience more than anything else. And I think the Lords of the Vale have been happy to have that barrier against anybody coming in that they didn't want to be coming in. Question from Reflective Rambling. Thank you so much. I see Chrissy Volstones, you picked up on this one as well, but thank you, Reflective Rambling, for picking up a question from Carl Logo. It's very generous of you. Who would be in your Kingsguard? Any character possible, dead or alive? Wow. So in the world of Song of Ice and Fire, I mean, I think probably Arthur Dane, probably Brienne, Sir Duncan probably as well. I don't know. It's quite hard, because what you want from your Kingsguard are, yes, very good warriors, but you also want loyalty, and I think that this is something that interesting when we're talking about Aegon the Sixth, is he's appointed the first member of his Kingsguard now, so Rolly, and his mentor John Connington was like, he's not a very good fighter, and Aegon goes, yes, I would much rather somebody who is absolutely loyal to me than and is an okay fighter than somebody who is not necessarily loyal to me but is a great fighter, because these are the people who are actively guarding my life. So I think that the biggest thing would be that loyalty element going on in there. But above and beyond that, I think you're then just looking for the greatest or strongest fighters that you possibly can. And it's about the people who are able to stand in the way of danger. I think someone like, frankly, Ned Stark would be good in a different world. Than he was not the heir to Winterfell, then maybe he would have made a good member of the Kingsguard. So I think that's where I would go with it. Not many of the actual members of the Kingsguard is probably where I would be my starting point. Some of them, clearly, like Arthur Dayne, were great fighters, but a lot, not so much, it has to be said. Maybe someone like Visenya, actually. Okay, Barristan. Yes, that's a good call from Arcanix. Reflective Rambling saying, now I want to know what his 7 would be from any fandom. That will take me a lot longer to think about it, but we can start with Obi-Wan Kenobi. Why not? And Dan the Dog as leader of the Kingsguard. Yes, I think he would do excellent work on that. Okay, so let's have a quick flick through. If we've got any more questions to be answering. The Seven Samurai, Carl Karsnark saying, picking the 7 Samurai from 7 Samurai. Less counting from me. Yep, good. Emergency Critic Hologram. Do any of the Lords of the Vale actually like the Starks or Tullys? The idea that they might support the North or Riverlands has always seemed odd to me. Whether they like the Starks or Tullys is an interesting question. So the Royces do seem to have a respect for the old ways. Now, having said that, they seem to have followed in with the culture of the Andals. It's very noticeable that the main character in the prologue to Book 1, Waymar Royce, is a Royce, and he clearly saw this as going to join the Night's Watch as being a noble endeavor, and that seems to imply that he would think that the Starks, who are the great patrons of the Night's Watch, are also noble in some way. As for the link across with the Tullys, now you have to remember that the Tullys they're not the sort of the richest or the oldest heritage or the most powerful or richest families in the Riverlands, but Hoster Tully was very much a sort of a politically driven person, and he was proactively trying to get all of these links across with other families. He was setting up marriages with the Starks. He was obviously then he got his other daughter to marry into the Arryns, so there are family ties across there. And also, of course, anyone who remembers Jon Arryn will also remember people like Ned Stark, because Ned did spend a large amount of his youth there. So there are, and people probably knew and respected him. So yes, there are links across there. We're not told all of them, obviously, but there are some family links. And then across with the Tullys, obviously, as well, we get the Blackfish, who came across with Lysa Tully, who became Lysa Arryn. So there are family links across, even if they're not naturally sort of allied. See, McBroom, they don't have as many cool houses as everyone else. Yes, I think I would probably agree with that, although the Corbreys and the Royces certainly have quite good amount of background on history and cool things. Okay, I think that is probably where I'm going to bring this one to a close. If you are at all interested, thank you so much, by the way, fantastic questions today in the chat as well. Next time next week we're going to be doing the Westlands, so House Lannister, Castle Rock, all of that stuff. But if you are watching this back a little bit later and you would like to watch some more of these live streams, there will be a link appearing somewhere around here. If you are wanting to support the channel, or if you would like to get access to some patron-only benefits, then there is going to be a link appearing around here. Okay, everyone, take care, and I shall see you again next week.